first.
You're going first. Brian's going first.
So, just reflecting back on the year, you know, it was for me personally a very exciting year. Being able to, you know, play in the Club World Cup, you know, that was a massive, massive opportunity for this club. Don't know if I'll be around if we ever get there again, Craig, but it was such a big deal, precursor to the 2026 World Cup, showing that Seattle can host these types of events. Our fans have always shown up for big games, but 2026, was it a success? That was the first thing I asked myself upon reflection after the loss in Minnesota. And I still come away with similar thoughts about that game, the performance, the year. There was a lot of success there in the year. We played a lot of games, you know, starting with the CCC way back when. You know, I thought everything was a success up until that final moment, because this club always tries to get deeper into the playoffs. And I watched some of the games over the last couple of days, some interesting games for sure, good TV, good watching, but it felt a little odd to be sitting on the couch. What does 2026 look like? Craig and I have already started to have a lot of conversations about making the team better, how we're going to do that going forward. I'm excited for preseason. I thought last year again, you know, the staff did a tremendous job. Coaching staff did a great job. I really love the progression that players made. You know, and it's not just the guys that we always talk about like Obed or Jackson or whatever, but it's the development portion of our club. You know, Georgie made good strides this year, Snyder, we got Seba, we've got guys coming up. You know, it's really, really good and exciting to watch these young kids develop into grown men. And then the work environment this year was really tremendous. I have to credit Craig a lot for that. Even on tough games, he's always standing up in the tunnel, making sure he shakes our hand on the way out. Some of the stuff that we do in this building has a lot to do about the culture that both Craig and I think is very important for this club. Because what you hear from me all the time, you know, it's there, I'm out in the press a little bit more than he is, that he and I share a lot of the same values: hard work, commitment, never giving up, smart, being intelligent at your job, you know, common sense, and Pacific Northwest grit. Was wearing his Washington Husky jersey earlier because both the men's and the women's team, soccer teams, have done very well following that, because Maggie Dutra, I'm gonna little shout out to her. She's part of the women's team, and you know, it's been a really good story in the media for a lot of different reasons. A real heartwarming story about their success and, you know, some of the challenges that they've had to overcome. So happy and distracted because Jeremiah just walked in. But very happy to sit up here and talk about 2025 and the highs and even some of the lows. But really what I want you guys to talk about is the future, because I see a bright future, and I'm happy to, you know, continue working with Craig.
Yeah, I'll simply echo, you know, hands down the most enjoyable year of my career as a general manager, just because of the progression of so many people, not just the players, but the staff. And, you know, a lot of people positioned to find better opportunities, bigger opportunities elsewhere because of the things we were able to accomplish this year as a group. And, you know, for me, that's an important thing. It goes back to all the qualities Brian listed about who we are and what we are as a culture. And part of that is trying to make sure everyone gets to the highest capability that they have as an individual. So, obviously successful year on the field, incredible amount of games played, but incredible amount of success had as well. There's a lot of teams that play a lot of games that don't win nearly as much as we did, and The fireworks in the middle of the year made it a lot of fun. Fell a little short at the end of the year in terms of the fireworks we wanted to create, but I guess that's where the two UW programs will have to keep us busy over the next couple weekends.
All right, with that, we'll turn it over to you all for your questions. If you have one, go ahead, show hands, and we'll get started. Jackson, I saw you first.
I think for both of you guys, Craig, Brian, the roster as it sits right now, as we look ahead to 2026, how far off is the roster as it sits right now from where you'd like it to be, say, 3 months from now?
Well, I like the roster as it sits now. I mean, look, we've lost some pieces. You know, that's natural. But the thing that I like about this, and maybe I'm talking about myself, is stability. You know, because I don't get too high, too low. You know, there's teams around the league that do it differently. They change 10, 12 players out every year. That's not the way we do things. I think the influential players that we brought this year, Jesus, Paul, you know, when Paul went down, Ryan Kent, and again, you know, backfilling with the guys that we produce. You know, the roster's was good for us this year, and we hope it's going to be a good roster for us next year as well.
I mean, yeah, look, it's just like a high school. You have a graduating class every year, right? So there's always a new set of players that are going to come in. Doesn't matter how we do it. Go over it every year. You never have the same team year to year ever. So you know, we'll look to add some. We're still letting some of the water still has to settle in terms of a few decisions being made. But coming into next year, I think we have a really good team, you know, and kind of goes back to what Brian and I always talk about when we really get to the nuts and bolts about adding a player. It usually comes down to, is this player going to touch the field for us? And if they're not, then why are we adding a player? So it's a fun challenge to have. There's a lot of teams that aren't in the position we're in terms of players coming back. So good position, but obviously teams are never good enough in sports, are they? Right? Even when you win, you talk about getting better. So.
All right, we'll go to Tim next.
Craig, can you sort of characterize where things stand with Stefan and Paul specifically right now, and do you anticipate having either one of them back on this roster next year?
They're both free agents, so this is a new thing, relatively new in MLS. It's free agency, right? So they're both free agents. So the second half of that question that's mutual. Neither I nor they can answer that single-handedly, right? But there's healthy conversations between, and there's been plenty of conversations. You know, I meet with players all the time. Spend hours with both those guys. Brian spends every day with those guys. So we've had a lot of good conversation, but obviously there's no resolution to speak to yet.
All right, we'll go back to Maz, and then over to Nico Moreno. Yep, we'll make our way up.
Craig, when you, and Brian as well, when you all look at the roster where you're at now, and you're not in the MLS championship, in your evaluation, what's missing? And not specifically in terms of a name, but what do you think is missing?
It's a tricky question. And one of the reasons it's tricky is because we've got a great big trophy that we won in the middle of the year with this group. And so this group that we had this year, which obviously, as I mentioned, won't be the exact same next year, but this group is capable of winning any game. And I think over the course of the 3 games versus Minnesota, I think arguably we deserved a few more goals. We probably could have made a few less mistakes and been playing yesterday. Who knows what happens in that case? We're asking a different question. So in terms of a specific piece, I'm not sure there's one that would unlock it, because the truth is this is the exact group of players that won a big trophy. So I think we have a lot of quality, and like I said, the challenge is always going to be not when we're talking about a depth piece center back or a depth piece midfielder or something like that, but you know, adding players that truly impact this group. Danny Wazowski coming off a career year that is frankly, puts him in elite numerically elite numbers that Jordan Morris visited the year before in terms of scoring as a striker. Osaze de Rosario's contributions up top. I think we had 20. Trying to think between those three, I'm not sure how many goals, but you're looking that position produced well over 20 goals this year for us. So when we look by position and break it down by person, that's when we start to look at how it complements each other. Brian's a coach. He'll tell you exactly what he needs if he wants to, but in terms of one player, one name, one position, I'm not sure that it's as easily identifiable in our group as it is in many others.
And I would answer that, Maz, like this. So if you look at the team and the performance against Minnesota and just overall in general, we scored a bunch more goals than we did last year. Remember, that was the emphasis coming in, okay? Maybe the couple of goals that we gave up against Minnesota in that second game weren't great, from a long throw-in and the corner kick, and we've already talked about it as a staff, talking about defending set pieces, making sure we control and do some of what we control, we get better at, okay? But we were close. And, you look at the games, how they played out, the LAFC and some of the other things, you have to play the games. Our roster was good. We had the flexibility to bring Jordan out here and bring Masowski on at the end, and that was working for us. We were pretty dangerous. I mean, we get that third goal, and for sure we're going down to San Diego to play. So overall, some of these questions are going to be answered in preseason based on recovery of certain players, okay? Because you got to look at Pedro, you got to look at Paul, you got to look at some of the guys that are going to be back because of a contractual thing, and then he and I are going to sit down and talk about stuff and figure out which direction we want to go with the team.
All right, we'll go to Nico next.
Craig, where are the negotiations with Obed Vargas at this time in terms of an extension? And is there any real concern that Obed would either by ways of a pre-contract or just playing out his contract here, would he be able to walk out as a potential free transfer? And how high in the objective list is it for you to prevent that from happening?
Oh, he's a great young player. That's undeniable. And so there's a lot of interest in him. There's a lot of interest in keeping him. We've been in ongoing conversations with him. A lot of times the players make decisions. They get to make decisions for their own career as well, right? So we have a great contract with him. We've always had a great relationship with Obed, and right now that's where we are. If that changes, you guys will probably know before I do.
But are you concerned that he might? How bad would it be for the club if he's to walk out just as a free transfer?
You'd have to ask if it happens, but I don't view things the same way you do.
So you're not concerned about it?
I'm not concerned. He's a very good Sounders player.
Jeremiah.
I guess this is for Craig. How would you assess the amount of flexibility that you have going into this offseason in general, but also in comparison to previous off seasons?
Well, you saw this morning probably the amount of players we have coming back, and the players that aren't, or the options we didn't pick up, they're not going to create a ton of salary cap flexibility because the stability of our roster was built a year ago and then developed remarkably well by the staff this year. And so in a year where we would typically have 8 or 9, 7, 8, 9 roster spots turning over, we just don't. We only have a couple players that weren't called on this year that didn't step up to the task and perform, and so we're bringing a ton of them back. And when you do that, along with natural raises built into contracts and all of that, you have to account for that in terms of financials. So flexibility will be created if we move players, but otherwise there's not a ton of flexibility. Just, obviously with the release this morning, you can write that all down on paper. It's a lot of the roster coming back, which is a lot of the salary cap.
Okay, over to George next.
Hi. So this question is for Coach Schmetzer. Coach, you have mentioned before that you are a hate to lose kind of guy. There was a quote from Marcel Bielsa, the Uruguay coach, where he says, "I'm a great generator of tension. When I arrive, the atmosphere becomes tense. That's why I appear little," which he attributes to being a person that fears losing more than enjoying winning. It seems that you are a much more joyous person to be around. And so I wanted to know how you do that, and also how you evolved as a coach, because this is your third decade as being a head coach, and how you handle different generations of players, especially when you seem to be a very sensitive person and you're in a role where you have to make hard decisions and have difficult conversations regularly.
Danny Jackson was in the room. He might have seen me kick a few coolers or something when I was much younger. There might have been some times where I got angry. But look, as you get older and you gain more experience, and look, you quoted Bielsa, everybody, that was a big headline because of, with Gino and all that sort of stuff. Look, my career here with the Sounders, I know I've been very lucky to coach here, to play here as a club, work with good people. I understand all of that. My evolution is always about change is sometimes good. Too much change, maybe for me, not so good, because I think I'm pretty steady. I believe in certain things. I believe in Pacific Northwest grit, never quit, fighting to the end, all of those qualities that I think are important, that embody this region. How we evolve, how I evolve the next few years, I will continue to gather information, take in new ideas, give my opinion as needed, managing the players. Again, this year, a few challenging conversations, but nothing that, is anything to be concerned about. I think the locker room was the tightest group of players that we've had here at the club. I think you've heard that from other players as well. It's not just my opinion, it's the players' opinion. And, I take a lot of pride in, the staff. Coaches do a good job, Adam, even Nolan, the equipment guy, Chris Cornish, his staff, Hillary, everybody, Sheila, they all do a good job in building a really good culture. And that always helps when I have to give bad decisions or bad choices to players. You just look them in the eye and you give them the information, and they know it's coming from how I feel.
Okay, we'll go right here next, and then if there are other questions from the room, please go ahead and let us know, and we'll keep going.
So, Coach, this is a time for reflection, obviously, and we look back in 2024 and 2025. Would you please compare these two seasons and give us three things that you think were good or bad in this season?
Well, in 2024, we made it to the conference final, and we were about 8 minutes away from hosting MLS Cup. And that was incredibly disappointing in many ways because you were so close. You fast forward to this year and you look at the potential of the roster and the team and how we're playing and the success playing against Messi and the ball and Busquets and all of those players in front of 70,000 people and us winning that game. You saw how good Miami looked. They looked pretty good. So, that disappointment certainly was there this year. Some of the positives, again, 2024, having Jordan come and play as a center forward, I think it was part of his development. Danny Masowski this year, we talk about Christian Roldan a lot. His development coming from playing out here more on the right in 2024, which was my position that I thought he was best at, but he came inside and has done a tremendous job, put him in, the conversation about going to the World Cup. How great would that be to have one of our Sounder players, playing or stepping out on the field in Seattle Stadium or whatever they're going to call it for the World Cup. Andrew Thomas calling out his penalty kick save, Jackson Reagan, a couple of guys that we've had. There's been a lot of good things and a lot of bad memories, but you know, that's sports. I mean, we always ebb and flow, and you know, fans are excited one minute, they're sad the next. Same with us coaches.
Okay, we'll go back row to Felipe, and you haven't seen follow-ups, so we'll continue on with Maz and Jackson and Jeremiah. I see you.
Thank you, Matt. This is for both of you. Last year or this year, preseason was the World Cup. The Club World Cup was in mind for this preseason. What about next year is gonna be the World Cup? How is the energy gonna? You guys are gonna use the energy towards the World Cup to prepare the season, and also because there has been big changes on the schedule of the next season.
I'll let Craig talk about the schedule and all the particulars, but the Club World Cup was a carrot for the players, yes, Felipe. And we're working as a staff to figure out new ways to get them energized again. But, you know, the World Cup is very singular. It doesn't, you know, the Sounders aren't playing in the World Cup. So for me as a coach, it's a little different than perhaps what Craig has to deal with.
I just get told when the schedule changes, and then we adjust. No, look, it's there's no season is simple. Some are harder than others. This last year with 50 games, with the Club World Cup being in the middle of it. Next year with the World Cup break, there's a lot of schedule changing and manipulation that's been going on over last year, over next year into 27 maybe, and you know we'll take it as we go. We're both pretty calm people when it comes to that stuff. You don't really have a choice, so you can either get off the ride or stay on it, you know, and we just got to manage through it. So when we see these big breaks in the calendar, the challenge is how do we as a group find a message to motivate the guys maybe a little bit beyond where they are. Most of them are self-motivated. They're pro soccer players. I mean, let's be honest. They want to win. They don't show up to take seconds. So we just have to do the little things along the way. And when these big blocks get taken out of your schedule, it's going to have an impact. And we're going to have a lot of games before the World Cup and a lot of games after the World Cup next year. And we already know we've got 38 or 39 to play. So, you know, you can do the math. It's not that different than this year in terms of games every 3 or 4 days when we're playing them.
Okay, Ethan.
Craig, right over here.
Yeah.
2 years since signing Pedro de la Vega, big moment for the club, a lot of dollars and resources allocated. I'm curious, what is your evaluation of him as a player 2 years in? And Brian, I'm curious, what have you learned about him as a player since coming in 2 years ago?
Mine won't be as insightful as Brian's because Brian and the staff work with him every day. What I know is we signed the right guy, right character, right talent. You know, I've rarely seen a player, everybody talks about unfortunate and this and that, I've rarely seen a player sustain, I've never seen a player sustain the injury he had this year. I've been around the game a long time, personally never seen it, but in terms of fitting in terms of character, in terms of quality, you know, he's all of those things and more when he's healthy, right?
I'm writing notes because look, you're talking about Pedro as a player. It's incomplete because of the injuries that he's had. He was going like this. The Pushkash, the goal of the year. You saw his individual talent, his technical ability in tight spaces, the joy that he has when he's playing. You see all of that. It's infectious. But him as a human being. And we talk a lot about that, you know, when it comes to signing players, you can do it differently. You know, obviously everybody has different ways, but we feel strongly that getting good people into the building and then developing them as soccer players or individuals is a pretty good way of doing business. And Pedro fits that character. I mean, from the minute he came in this building, very respectful, always shook your hands, look you in the eye, would always have nice things to say. He's had to overcome a lot and he still has a positive outlook in the weight room, in the training room, was encouraging his teammates throughout the playoff run. Even when he and Paul were competing for the same spot, they still would talk at training. They would talk, well, if I go in, I'm gonna do this, and you're gonna do that. And, you know, a lot of times you don't get that. So, he's a tremendous soccer player and an even better human being.
I think a lot of teams don't operate the way we do, the way Brian and I operate is character then quality. And that's what we got. We got both.
All right, we'll come back down here, Jackson, and over to Tim.
Yeah, quick one for Brian, longer one for Craig. The quick one is on Pedro. Still looking at the same timeline, middle of next year. Any update on Pedro?
I would be remiss if I gave you an exact date. It will be, maybe mid next year is a little long. I'm hoping that it's a little shorter than that, Jackson, but let's just see.
Yeah. Hey, Craig, going back to the kind of the contract situations and stuff, when you're negotiating, say specifically with younger players, how much does maybe interest in wanting to test themselves, whether it's a bigger league or overseas somewhere else, how much does that influence those conversations, whether it's numbers or specific wording of them saying, I want to test myself? How much do you see that in just in general negotiations with younger players?
Yeah, it's definitely evolved over the last 10 years, which is a compliment across our league in terms of the quality, but also in terms of the way we're being interpreted outside of the U.S. and the way people are viewing the quality of our league and the quality of the young players. I think every individual is different, right? We all are in this room, but some of these guys don't want to go that far from home, and some of them it doesn't bother them in terms of the way they think, the way they dream, the way they want to develop, and so. It's always individualized, which is why we sit with each of these players and we get to know them. We get to know what their individual goals are, and then we try and work as closely as we can with them. Most players, trying to think if I know any that don't have an agent anymore. Most players have agents, so there's always four sides to every story. There's my side, the agent side, the player side, and then the truth, which lies somewhere in the middle of all those. And so you'd have to get us all sitting up here and then not believe any of us completely. But there's always, one of the things I promise these players is that 10 years from now, they're not going to look back and say that this coach or this GM ever told them a non-truth. And that's not going to be true everywhere in the world. But we don't always have to agree on where we're going. We don't always have to see it the same way. But we always have to talk about it. We always have to know. So we have a pretty good grasp on what every single player on our roster wants, says they want, thinks they want, and what the agent says they want as well. And like I said, none of those are the actual truth. It's somewhere in between all of them.
So you're lying to us? That's what you're saying?
I'm never going to. I can only give you the brutal truth, whether you like it or not.
Brian Zhao is obviously someone who's kind of said he's going to move on. Can you speak to sort of what he's provided during his tenure here, kind of overcoming the injury and coming back and playing the way that he did during his time?
Well, again, you want to talk about a good human being? Let's just start with that. In that locker room, in that dressing room, on the training field, conversations that he has on the side with players, coaches, staff. He's always been an incredibly good person. Again, some of the harder conversations I've had with Zhao about playing time down at the end, Obed, Christian, all that sort of stuff, he always handled those with the utmost respect, which I appreciated. I think we ended things on a very respectful, good tone. His future, is it going to be here somewhere around the club? Maybe. I would hope so, because we like, again, bringing good human beings, good people into the club. But I don't know what he wants to do. I mean, he obviously has, been told that we're not going to pick up his option. But again, it's his career, it's his life. What he wants to do, I wish him nothing but the best.
High character is a priority.
speaking of the brutal truth here, this is kind of a softball, but first, Brian, your whole coaching staff is coming back. Is that decision been made?
Yes.
Okay. And then Craig, just help me out on this one. How? Oops.
Good. No, you always have to qualify it in our jobs, as of today. I mean, those guys deserve interviews and they deserve opportunities just like the rest of our staff. So I'd be remiss to not point out, yeah, they're coming back for now.
For now.
Yeah.
And how have you seen this coaching staff evolve? And it can be in the exit interview, it can be tactical, but how? Because you had the highest of highs, the lowest of lows, and there was a common theme. How have you seen the coaching staff evolve, especially Mr. Sounder, Mr. Seattle to your right?
Look, I came here in 21. I came here in 21 and started to work with Mr. Sounder. And, the evolution of the position I was in to where I am now allows us to work probably a little closer, a little more influential on one another's communication styles, the way we interact with the group, our visual presence that sometimes comes without speaking. We've had a lot of conversations. When should I be around? When, where can I help Brian on the field in terms of could his assistants be doing more? And the evolution he's had, it's a wild one because everyone will tell you that, I don't want to say old dogs, but everyone will tell you that Mr. Sounder and people that earn those nicknames have a hard time evolving and continuing to grow. That's not been a challenge. That's not been a challenge for Brian. It's not been a challenge for me speaking with him. The way he's empowered his coaching staff, his assistants, there's constant growth going on with those guys too. I think we both view that constant growth for everyone in the organization that we oversee is the true sign of success for leaders. And I think that's something we share in common, and I think he's implemented that. And even if you speak to the support staff, our medical staff, our performance staff, our administrative staff, equipment staff, everyone would attest that over the last 2 or 3 years that we've been working together, there has been continued growth from Brian. It's a compliment beyond what I could put into words because he certainly doesn't have to. He certainly doesn't have to change at this point, but he's willing to evolve with us. You look at his roster when I took over versus where it is now, and that staff under his leadership has adjusted and succeeded.
I'm going to stop this awkward conversation and give you a concrete story. So evolve and having good people work for you. So I have a great staff. Preki, former coach of the year. Freddie could be a coach. Tommy, my guy on both shoulders. My conscience, lead Sounder Blue. But young Andy Rose is an up and coming coach. And so he had this idea, because we do a lot of different things in training, but he had this idea for our match day -1, where we got a points table together for, match day -1 actually meant something, because back in the day, match day -1 was more of a lighter mood, and, we wanted to always keep it light, let them focus on, enjoying themselves, all the tactics were already done. Well, we started this competition about halfway through the year, and, the guys just went nuts. I mean, they started competing. Our match day -1 training levels, we raised the intensity. And that helped us through the Leagues Cup run, through the end of the season. And that's an idea that a young coach, brought to the table. We all discussed it. We thought it was a great idea. We implemented that, and it worked.
It's awkward for strict Germans to accept compliments.
Exactly.
Okay, we'll go to Jeremiah next.
Craig, this last summer, I guess, there was a lot of talk about bringing in a U22. I'm just curious where that stands and where that pursuit goes and how you would assess the budget for making a move like that.
Yeah, thankfully we didn't. Because Osaze proved to be more than what we would have gotten had we spent millions of dollars on anyone else. So a lot of times the best deals you do are the ones you don't, and this is further proof of that. So We'll continue to evaluate, and if we bring in a U22, the rule set won't change. It'll be someone we think can actually contribute. And while we had our eyes set on someone we felt could contribute, who, by the way, has had plenty of success already in the start of his season overseas, Osaze did the job for us, and so we'll keep playing around with it. But again, with all the players coming back, we're not going to bring a U22 in that isn't planned on getting minutes, that isn't a planned player that's going to contribute, and that isn't someone that we expect the coaches to use. We don't need to bring another player in that needs to develop for 2 more years with our current roster. If we make some changes with some of our young players, if some of those guys transfer out for whatever reason, I think then the conversation becomes probably we can then look to invest into more of a project player, but right now we still have to focus on players that can play tomorrow, especially with the load of games we're going to have next year.
Jess.
This question is for Brian. I just was curious if you could elaborate a little more on JP's career here at the club, his significance on and off the pitch.
I think off the pitch I said it pretty clear, but on the pitch maybe I left out a few things. I mean, really influential in many, many important games. You know, the goal that he scores, I forget who it was against, that he picks up this ball out of the air, brings it to his left, and volleys it in. Could have been a finalist for a Pushkash award. I think there was many other moments where his desire to impact games in a positive way, which means winning, that can be infectious throughout a group. And so you always saw JP give it his all every game. And again, that's due part and parcel to his training habits. And that was a positive impact on the group, on young players. Taking young Obed under his wing, playing there, having the old guy Albert sit next to him. I mean, he was able to impact many different players in a positive way on the field.
Thank you.
All right, over to Nico next. And then George, I know you've been waiting.
Craig, Ryan came coming here for like last year was a great find by you and the scouting staff. What were those conversations like about him potentially coming back? And is that door completely closed? And for both of you guys, how does the calendar changes anything about what you guys do, you guys' job per se?
Well, we had a conversation with Ryan that there's just not going to be a role for him here next year. So that door's closed. In terms of the calendar change, that doesn't happen for another year. So I think we'll have I'll have a better answer for you 12 months from now. But right now we're playing the exact same calendar as we did this year, minus our summer not being as consistent in terms of games. But the playoff structure, I think everything stays the same for next year. So, we've got to check in January 10th and get the job going.
Nothing to add there, Nico.
All right, over to George.
So this question is for Craig, and it's about the stadium. So there are a lot of statues in Seattle of famous people like Jimi Hendrix, Chris Cornell, Shift Seattle. Outside of the UW, you have Coach Don James, you have Jim Owens. Outside of the Clemens Place Arena, you have Sue Bird and Lenny Wilkins. Outside of T-Mobile, you have Saunders, Onak, and Griffey Jr., Edgar Martinez. So my question is, when can we have some soccer statues outside of Seattle Stadium or Lumen? And can we get a statue of Megan Rapinoe and the person next to you before the World Cup?
I'm not bothered if they go up by a stadium, just so long as they go up in the city. I don't think the location matters, frankly. People that matter to your city and matter as much and give as much to your city as some of these people, like the guy to my right, it doesn't matter about location, it matters about the sincerity of it. So I think it's I think it's a fun topic, and I don't think he'd be choosy if someone was worried about the location.
Still have one?
All right. Craig, for these schedule changes, just one follow-up question here. Do you, the whole premise of is to align with the world market, right? So do you see any benefits for the Sounders on 2027 being that window?
I think there's a lot of unknown. I mean, there's a lot of theories. Depending on which room you sit in, you'll hear anything from more exposure to higher transfers for players we have. I honestly, in my chair, I think we've got to get there first, because remember, now we're also shopping for players at the exact same time that all of the wealthiest clubs in the world are shopping for players as well. And so the level of competition to attract a player may be greater as well. So I think there's still a lot to figure out in terms of the evolution. We've got a lot going on over the next 2 or 3 years in our league in terms of massive, momentous decisions to be made in terms of CBA agreements and schedule changes and things like that. So until the dust settles, truly, I'm not sure how to do anything but speculate. I don't see it shifting too many things. To be honest, I think we're an established league. I think we're, if not in the top 10, knocking the door. We're probably 9, 10, 11 in terms of world quality, in terms of our funding, in terms of the way we operate as a league. So I don't anticipate a lot of change other than probably a lot more rumors for you guys to have fun with in the summer.
All right, Jeremiah's going to close us out. Final one.
There's going to be a fair amount of opportunity, it would seem, for some of the younger guys on this roster. And I was just wondering if you could speak to some of the younger players who you expect to step up and have to kind of carry bigger loads than they've had in the past.
Sure. I'll take some of that and you can have the final word. Look, younger players, first thing that jumped into my head is, they need to be robust, because maybe to answer your question a little bit, the first part of the year is going to be compact. You got a big break and then another compact, and then you got a 14-game stretch to get to the summer calendar. So we're going to need a roster that's built with, robustness and young, and that's not a bad thing. Although, Steph Fry's taking very good care of his body, and he's lasted for many, many years. But you're going to talk about, Obed, because he's still under contract. Danny Leva had a standout year this year, made really some big improvements. Reed Baker Whiting will continue to push Nuhu and also push on the other side. Kalani came in and was lightning in a bottle. Someone that came in and just did a great job. Is Andrew Thomas a young player? Is Jackson a young player? Some of those guys in their mid-20s, is that a young guy? Snyder obviously got a lot of, talk in his cameos this year, scoring goals. He's got a little bit more to his game, going forward. He arrives in the box very well. Kind of reminds me of Albert sometimes, because Albert's very goal dangerous. We're going to need to rely on all of those players, including some of the old guys, to really, and also, if I think about it, Jeremiah, your question, it's going to fall on the coaching staff to make sure that the rotations are good, to make sure that we have the right mix of experienced guys and younger guys, and help bring them along, but also, do what's most important, and that's win games. Because, I can't play young players just to play young players, and I can't have favorites just because I'm favored or I like guys. We got to win. That's part of the culture of the club.
And durability is always something we talk about in MLS. Next year with the break in the middle of summer, it's going to be a big thing. People overlook when we put Jackson out. When he first got a run of 8 games, he ended up sitting out a month because of an injury. So we've got to be careful with how we get these guys in until we get them durable enough to survive on a game-to-game schedule. And Obed Vargas is a good example of that this year. Someone who proved durable, throughout the entire calendar, which is remarkable, which is not something we saw even 2 years ago from.
right, we'll leave it there. Thanks to Craig